A lot of you might be thinking the title is clickbait. Well, it's not. I'm being 100% genuine here. I do not hate the Percy Jackson movies. I definitely don't like them. They're a very poor rendition of one of my favorite book series, yet I can't summon any sort of visceral anger towards them. Not now, not when I saw them in theaters. As much as I hate the way they massacred my boy, the fire isn't there. What it comes down to is that they're competent as films, for the most part. Fans tend to put them up there with stuff like The Last Airbender and Artemis Fowl. Are they, though? Sure, they do a bad job of adapting the story and characters, but they don't completely fail at it, nor are they messes of films where you can hardly follow what's going on. As much as it hurts to say out loud, the Percy Jackson movies are alright kids' adventures. They fall short of the majesty that is the book series, though. It's like if you were flying to a vacation in Hawaii and your plane exploded over the ocean, sending most of the passengers to a watery grave while you managed to cling to a flotation device for a day before being rescued. You didn't get a sunny vacation, but at least you're still alive. The dead passengers are the last airbender, in this metaphor. So I guess let's talk about this one entry in a long line of failed attempts at establishing a cinematic universe. Spoilers and stuff, blah blah blah. Let's begin at the most natural point, the beginning. I've seen worse. We start with Poseidon and Zeus arguing over a stolen lightning bolt, then we cut to Percy's home life before the supernatural stuff pops out and the adventure begins. This is already different than the books, so I feel the need to go over it. Within the first 20 minutes, the audience already knows that the Greek gods are real and live amongst us while keeping themselves hidden for some reason, that Percy is the child of Poseidon, that Zeus's master bolt has been stolen, and that a war is on the verge of starting. The problem with this is that it's the wrong exposition to focus on. Percy Jackson is a kid's fantasy adventure. At the beginning of this type of story, you need to do two things if you want it to work. Number one, show off how crappy the main character's life is. This is seeing that Harry sleeps in a cupboard while his cousin gets a massive pile of presents. We instantly sympathize with him and want to see him escape this situation. Number two, hint at the existence of a hidden magical world. This would be the opening scene where Dumbledore and company drop him off, or the millions of Hogwarts letters being delivered. It lets the audience know there are other things out there without front-loading exposition, easy to keep track of, and it tantalizes us with the promise of more. The Lightning Thief succeeds at number one, but fails at number two. The instant Percy's stepfather Gabe enters the film, we hate him. He's rude, implied to be violent, he drinks too much, just a stereotypical shitty parental figure. And, unlike the book, Percy isn't at boarding school, so he has to put up with Gabe all the time. We also see that Percy's school situation is unpleasant when other kids start fighting in the halls and he has dyslexia, which makes studying hard. I don't have dyslexia. In fact, I've heard this depiction isn't very accurate, but it does get the point across. Granted, Percy never acts like he has ADHD despite saying it, but they got half right. The main problem is that there's no mystery in this version. We don't see hints that something is going on, which makes us just as confused as Percy. We're given all of the necessary information right off the bat. There's no wondering which god he's a child of, no wondering why these monsters are coming after him specifically, no wondering if maybe Poseidon really did steal the bolt, nothing to draw us in at all. As much as I dislike the opening scenes for giving up any mystery, Sean Bean and Kevin McKidd are both giving a decent performance in them. So the opening isn't awful. Things slowly deteriorate from there, though. Percy is attacked by one of the Furies, goes to camp, loses his mom, kills the Minotaur, learns about how Greek myths are real, learns Poseidon is his dad, makes new friends, learns his mom is being held hostage, and heads off to the underworld. This is all done about as quickly as I just rattled it off, with little time taken to establish the new status quo or the characters' relationships. And it all takes place over 2 days in-universe, with a brief gap for Percy to be unconscious. So rather than us spending time getting absorbed in all this, we're just expected to play along and enjoy ourselves without being given a reason to. I like how Percy just goes off to save his mom without permission instead of being given a quest to retrieve Zeus's bolt. He's got an attitude of, fuck you people and your war, I'm just trying to help my family. This is a change which gives Percy more agency than he had in the book, which is good. But then Annabeth just sort of tags along despite moments earlier claiming she didn't know how she felt about Percy. If anything, wouldn't he go to Luke for help in this version? There was no time devoted to them becoming friends. This movie is only an hour and 50 minutes long, which isn't that crazy. You could easily add an additional 15 minutes of runtime without being bloated or dragging on. The first Harry Potter movie was aimed at the same audience, and it's over 2.5 hours long. Spending 1 or 2 additional scenes at Camp Half-Blood would go a long way to patching over most of these early problems, which means they aren't backbreaking. These are easy fixes. The Last Airbender or Artemis Fowl would need to be rebuilt from scratch to become anything other than shit. After the quest begins, the structure of the story in the books follows a lot of classic Greek myths. The heroes go off to complete some task, and along the way they get sidetracked by a dozen other things. The Odyssey is a prime example. Odysseus wants to go home, but he keeps running into Cyclopes and stuff. People claim the movie sort of misses the point there by turning it into a scavenger hunt where the heroes search for the magic pearls. It doesn't, though. It's the same basic idea of a series of side quests merging into one big adventure. This makes adapting the story easier because you can add, remove, or combine these side quests to adjust the running time. And let's be real, some of these side quests aren't needed. Removed subplots that are okay to leave out. Being attacked by the Furies on a bus, fighting Echidna at the top of the St. Louis Arch, Grover's quest for Pan, being trapped by Procrustes, Dionysus being imprisoned on Earth, and doing a favor for Ares. I know that last one will rile some of you up, but let me explain. The whole Ares subplot is a red herring. It's meant to make the audience think he's a good guy before revealing that he's a bad guy before reversing that twist and making him a good guy again. In a medium with more limited time, you can't get away with things like that unless they're given a lot of screen time, which would mean cutting out even more stuff than they already did. Subplots that are removed that should have been kept. Hades losing his Helm of Darkness, Annabeth's backstory and connection to Luke, Talia's tree, Percy's week spent at Camp Half-Blood, and, of course, Kronos being the mastermind behind everything. All of these are key to the overarching story of the series. However, none of them make that much difference to the Lightning Thief. Including them would have given more dimension to characters and helped set up many sequels movie studios surely wanted to make. But taking them out doesn't open any plot holes. The story is still serviceable without them. With the exception of Percy only being at camp for a day. For real, his amazing sword fighting would be more believable if he had to work at it a little. Subplots added to the film that are fine to leave in. The climactic fight between Percy and Luke, and the gods being unable to interact with their demigod kids. The final battle is fun. It's between characters that we know and know, so I say fuck it, leave it where it is. Zeus's law just makes Poseidon look like less of a cunt for ignoring Percy his whole life. I like that change. It makes him a loving father torn away from family by duty rather than a disinterested authority figure like he was in the books. Subplots added that should have been removed. Hades and Persephone's marital problems, fighting the Hydra in Tennessee, and Percy and Annabeth's half-assed love story. Enough said. The final battle between Percy and Luke is a good climax. In fact, most of the action in this movie is solid, if not earth-shattering. But just look at them. They're flying around, causing each other to fall, sword fighting, summoning water, throwing lightning bolts. This is the kind of shit I came here for. And frankly, it's less stupid than a 6th grader defeating the literal god of war in a duel. Characters are a mixed bag, weirdly enough. Some of them are a great on-screen version of their book counterparts. Some are different, though enjoyable, interpretations, and some are utter crap. For starters, the main cast is all older than they were originally, being aged up from 12 to 16. This is a fine change. Have you ever seen most child actors? They're usually not very good. An actor's performance is highly dependent on their director, and that goes double for inexperienced actors, which child actors are by default. Ivana Baquero gave a great performance in Pan's Labyrinth because Guillermo del Toro is a great director. Jake Lloyd gave a bad performance in The Phantom Menace because George Lucas is a bad director. I'll pause to allow the prequel fans time to send me death threats. Chris Columbus directed The Lightning Thief along with the first 2 Harry Potter movies. Just watch Emma Watson over-enunciate every word and tell me he would have done a better job here. Look me in the eyes and tell me that. Their personalities aren't as changed as you might remember either. The book characters are full of life, quippy one-liners, amusing personality quirks, the sort of things that make the audience like them. The movie characters are too, sometimes, but the delivery leaves a lot to be desired. I keep hearing the dialogue and thinking, yeah, that sounds like something the characters would have said in the books, and sometimes the actors even deliver them well, but not always.
Like high school without the musical.
You're half donkey?
I'm half goat.
Zanzibaris! Watch out! Whoa, that's a sword, that's a sword!
The health department needs to get this place an F. Heads up.
Or what? What will you do? I'm already in hell.
This is a pen. This is a pen.
Percy is written as a fine character. It's just that Logan Lerman couldn't give half a shit about his performance. Okay, that's not fair. Sometimes he gives half a shit. Once in a while, he even goes all out and gives around 3/4 of a shit.
No, 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 no. All of it was real? My mom's gone?
He's given good performances before, so I'll chalk this up to a combination of poor directing and him being disinterested in the movie. Where movie Percy really falls apart is being too powerful. Every situation he escapes is either through his easily mastered powers or his dad speaking in his head to dispense godly wisdom. This combines with the bad acting to give him the charisma of a soggy biscuit and the intelligence of a pillowcase filled with dead batteries. At the beginning, we saw Percy struggle with his living situation and try to overcome it. After the adventure begins, he just slays the Minotaur without issue. He just captures the flag by himself. He just summons a wall of water to block the Hydra's fire. He never truly struggles. For a character that we initially connected with because of his struggles, that's a big failure. Grover is handled a lot better. When Brandon Jackson is on screen, the movies don't feel like they're sleepwalking. He pumps some real energy and humor into the cast. Even with Lerman's corpse-like emotional range, I still buy Percy and Grover as friends. That said, he is a bit different from his book counterpart. He's more confident, more sure of himself, he acts as more of a mentor to Percy, he hits Medusa with a fucking car. In other words, he's a fully realized character. Making him aggressively horny is funny, and more in line with the satyrs of Greek myth. He's also not 26 years old in the movies, which is good. Yeah, remember that? In the books, satyrs age at half the speed of humans, so Grover was pushing 30 years old and his friends were all like 12. I didn't forget, Uncle Rick. I never forget. Annabeth is definitely the character that was most harshly treated in the adaptation process. While movie Percy is an underplayed character, movie Annabeth is a slate so blank and thin that birds have killed themselves by flying into it. The only line where she has any real personality is this one.
Dude, we heading to the chapel. We getting married.
Romantic.
No.
In this version, she's just the best sword fighter at Camp Half-Blood right up until Percy comes along and shows her up. This is a common trope that I'm going to dub the badass damsel in distress. Basically, it's what happens when a female character is introduced as competent and self-reliant, oftentimes even the best at whatever she does, but as soon as the male protagonist shows up, he makes her look like a chump. Despite her being built up as the best wizard or most skilled mech pilot in the story, the protagonist still gets to be the one who saves the world and possibly rescue her once or twice. Beatrice the Golden Witch, formerly known as Digibro, once summed it up rather succinctly here.
There seems to be a trend in light novels lately of filling the main character's harem with girls who would otherwise be the strongest characters in the story if not for the main guy. The wish fulfillment aspect of this is obvious. You get to date all of the hottest, coolest, most powerful women around while still outdoing all of them and keeping your position as an alpha dude. It's all about striking that balance between having so-called strong female characters while also promoting the male power fantasy that young guys who watch this stuff are looking for.
That's the trap the books narrowly avoid, yet the films fall into. In the books, both Percy and Annabeth rely on their wits to escape many situations. They can't just fight their way out most of the time. It's not that Annabeth can't fight. She can. She just isn't defined by that. She's defined by her intelligence, her ability to think quickly, her talent at reading people, her knowledge of the mythological world. That's what makes her a well-written female character. Both Percy and Annabeth save each other more than once, and you just know that they never would have succeeded on any of their quests without working together. In the films, Annabeth is the one to bring up all the exposition, occasionally bring out items they use to beat bad guys, and be impressed by Percy being cool. And possibly kill this janitor. This problem is even worse in the second one. She doesn't even get to exposit about the prophecy or how to defeat Cyclopes. She just tags along. All the other characters are just watered-down versions of their book counterparts. Luke has motivation for wanting to rebel, but it's weaker. Chiron is a wise mentor, but not as much. Zeus is an angry, insecure asshole, but not... okay, that one is accurate. Hades was not handled well. However, his portrayal fits right in with the tone of the books. The gods and other magical beings are usually not shown to be dignified or unknowable. They're fucking silly. They're obsessed with television, or they love barbecue and they walk around in Hawaiian shirts. The point is that you wouldn't think they're gods from looking at them, and Hades dressing like Mick Jagger fits with that theme. Plus, he had his hell form, which is more in line with this powerful, godly idea. When we first see him, he's this massive fire demon that looks like he could wipe out the entire camp by himself. Then he challenges Percy to bring him the bolts, so as soon as he goes off on his quest, we know he'll have to overcome this monstrous creature somehow to save his mom. And when he arrives at the underworld, Hades makes it clear he can switch forms whenever he wants, so his human form is just masking his true power. We get his intimidating presence when it makes the story more intense, and his funny appearance when it gives the story levity. It's a clever way of handling things that never gets the credit it deserves. The second film is an odd phenomenon. It starts off understanding that it's part of a series by explaining the backstory of Talia Grace being turned into a tree and the tree's importance to the security of Camp Half-Blood. I'll pause for all those who didn't read the books to Google that. The Sea of Monsters feels like it wants to build a cinematic franchise by cramming all the exposition that should have been in the first film into the first few minutes, but then at the end, Kronos is defeated and cast back into Tartarus. Luke is also implied to be eaten by a Cyclops, meaning both the major villains are gone. What? You can't build up the big bad of an entire series and then have them immediately defeated. Imagine if Voldemort was beaten at the end of Chamber of Secrets. When he comes back again, he's not going to be very scary. If you ever saw my House of Night video, you know that almost every book in that series ends with the villains being set back and the heroes emerging triumphant, meaning the villains never come across as anything more than an annoyance. This film does exactly that. But then it still has Talia come back to life. Like, guys, do you want this to be self-contained or not? It even tries to entice us by bringing in the prophecy that Percy might destroy Olympus, only we don't just hear about it in vague terms for several books before seeing it on the eve of the final battle. Instead, we hear about the prophecy directly from the Oracle, played by UN General Secretary Avasarala.
And that half-blood of the eldest gods shall reach 20 against all odds.
Oh, please step on me. And you know what? I like this change too. Prophecies are a big part of Greek myths and tragedies. The earlier we know about them, the more time we have to think about what they mean. Normally I hate prophecies because they're just a cheap reason for the plot to happen. E.g., who will defeat the Dark Lord? The Chosen One. Why will the Chosen One do it? Because the prophecy says so. The Percy Jackson series is one of the only things I've ever come across that handles prophecies well, but if we had known the exact phrasing of the big one from the beginning, it would have been better. Speaking of Madame Avasarala, she also does a narration explaining the backstory of Kronos and his children. The animation for this bit is neat, looking kind of like moving stained glass. And I would leave it at that, but she claims that all three of Kronos' sons escaped being eaten when it was just Zeus. That's why he became king of the gods. He freed his siblings and led them in their rebellion to kill the Titans. Okay, I promise that I'll try not to focus on how the films diverge from Greek myths, because there's not any sort of canon to that. They would have all changed over time and retellings. It's not as though the books follow the myths completely anyway. Why the fuck is Persephone in the underworld during the summer? Have you no shame? Here's a list of more problems. The mist being literal mist in a can. Guys, you could have just mentioned the mist normally and say you forgot to tell Percy about it last time. If it's expensive and rare, then how do mythical creatures hide from mortals at all? Clarice's character arc being exactly like Annabeth's in the last movie. She's a rival who gains respect for him before secretly wanting to hop on his dick. Though she is a huge jerk to Percy, which fits more closely with her book counterpart. Tyson having demigod powers despite being a Cyclops. Most Cyclopes are children of Poseidon. If they all have the same powers as demigods, then demigods aren't very special. The heroes being swallowed by Charybdis and surviving. It makes Charybdis seem like less of a pervasive threat, and so the Sea of Monsters doesn't feel that dangerous. Annabeth not doing anything. Luke's army being small and lacking many monsters. Teenagers aren't as scary as a horde of giants and minotaurs. Chiron never mentioning that Kronos is his father. This kind of sweeps the fact that everything in the Greek world is related and that your family doesn't define you one way or the other under the rug. Also, this means that Chiron is Percy's uncle. Not important, but still odd to leave out. Okay, lots of dumb stuff that's bad on its own and adaptation-wise. There's some fun stuff in here too, though. The fight against the mechanical bull is cool, and it's not won through brute strength, so it fits more closely with most of the action from the books while also kickstarting the plot. Stanley Tucci is a perfect Dionysus. I could not have come up with a better portrayal of this guy. It's funny while still making him come across as a slimy, smarmy prick. He's not a villain per se, he's just a Greek god, and Greek gods usually have little respect for anyone less powerful than them. He's so far above us he doesn't have to consider our feelings. Like a politician, only more useful. Nathan Fillion's only scene is both a great adaptation of the book and a good watch on its own. He brings in his trademark charm in such a way that makes Hermes dignified, funny, fatherly, and powerful all at once. We can tell that he loves Luke even though he's decided to be evil, and that their relationship is very complicated in both directions. All this without them even meeting on screen once. The zombie Confederates are underutilized, but they're funny. They look silly, they walk around silly. They should have had some more silly lines to drive home the fact that they're a bunch of Confederate zombies who are in service to a daughter of Ares and fight mythological monsters, though. Clarice working closely with the heroes to save the day is accurate to the book. She seems to respect Percy more after the quest in the film, and maybe that could have led to an interesting relationship down the line. Because let's be honest, book Clarice almost never emerges from her role as a dumb bully character. Tyson's childlike innocence/stupidity is endearing without being annoying, which is an extremely difficult tightrope to walk. Usually when a character tries to do something like this, they wind up causing trouble for the other heroes to the point where their bumbling antics take up half the story. In this instance, he causes a few minor problems, but he balances that out with his helpfulness. Though his relationship with Percy is dog shit, look at this half-assed attempt at pulling our heartstrings when we think Tyson is dead.
I never called him brother. All I ever wanted was a brother, but I was too wrapped up in myself.
Lerman, did you lose a bet or something? Honestly, I would give this movie a positive review if it weren't for the climax. Setting aside deviations from the books, it just doesn't know what it wants to do. Does it want to set up the sequel or wrap up the story? Does it want to show Percy take on the ultimate evil big bad or fight his rival, Luke? Luke doesn't even have a sword during the fight for some reason. For real, dude, the fact that you were the best sword fighter at Camp Half-Blood was a huge part of your character. The fight choreography is fine. Truth be told, I really like the part where Kronos is reassembling himself and Percy jumps on the pieces to reach higher spots on his body, but it's over way too quick for me to really get into it. Overall, the Sea of Monsters is about the same as The Lightning Thief. The same quality, the same level of stuff changed from the books, and the same lack of energy in specific places that make it seem worse than it really is. At the end of the day, while these films feel as though they're beating our childhood like an alcoholic father with anger issues, they're not. They're competent movies in a lot of areas. Show them to someone in the target audience who's never read the books, they'd probably enjoy themselves fine. I know the word probably is doing some serious work there, but you get the point. Sometimes our passions can blind us. Sometimes we look forward to something so much that when it doesn't turn out the way we'd hoped, we stop looking for any other positives that might be hidden in the pile of rubble that is our dreams. That was a lot of mixed metaphors. The point is that just because they were terrible adaptations, they aren't necessarily terrible movies on their own. There are only some terrible parts to them. The opposite happens too. Sometimes we're so hyped for something that we ignore the obvious flaws when we finally get it. The Snyder Cut isn't that good, guys. It's an average film stretched out to be the length of Return of the King's extended edition. You people wanted me to make this video, so I made it. It's not about how the Percy Jackson movies are secretly genius, just that they aren't as bad as everyone says. Rick Riordan should never ever watch them, though. No one deserves to outlive their child like that. Thanks to all the names on here, those are my patrons, and thanks to $10 and up, Apo Savalainen, Olivia Ray, and Brother Santotis, Christopher Quinton, Embis, Joel, Karkat Kitsune, Liza Rudakova, Madison Lewis Bennett, Microphone, Paul Williams, Sad Mardigan, Tobacco Crow, Tom Beanie, and Ve Victus. You're all really cool. All the names on here, they gave me money. And they get stuff like early access to videos and voting on future video topics. If you want to be one, then do that. If you don't want to do that, then join my channel, become a channel member. That's great. Or just subscribe, like, video, comment. Spread this around. I need help.